I like The Last of Us 2.
Brizzau's a libtard soy boy who can't think for himself.
Oh, sorry, I meant I don't like The Last of Us 2.
Bigoted fuckface. Your brain is too tiny to comprehend true art.
The game is alright?
Pander more, you spineless coward.
I guess this could apply to most games on the market, but man, I have never seen such an intense discourse around a video game as there is with The Last of Us 2. It seems like it's considered either a work of art or a hot pile of shit. Obviously, there are opinions in the middle, but the point remains, this is absolutely the most divisive game I have ever seen. The gameplay, although not overly ambitious, is pretty solid with some very strong moments, and the voice acting, motion capture, and graphics are all top-notch. The divide, love and hate, all stems from the story, the events that take place, and its characters. To discuss the game, I'm gonna have to spoil it. So, if for some reason you clicked on this video discussing the game 4 years after its release and want to preserve the experience for yourself, I would recommend you click away now. Meet our two main characters, Joel and Ellie, from The Last of Us Part 1. Except, just fucking kidding, Joel immediately gets brutally murdered by some buff chick. Little do you know at this point that this buff chick is actually our second main character. Yup, not only does Naughty Dog immediately and brutally kill off the beloved main character in the sequel to their smash hit game, halfway through, they force you to play as the person who you just watch murder him in front of your eyes. To say that these development choices are bold is a massive understatement, and I would wager that whether you enjoyed The Last of Us 2 or not hugely depends on your interpretation of these events. The rest of the game becomes an allegory for the cycle of violence. Something like, "Hey, you pissed in my shoes! That's it, I'm shitting in your shoes! Yeah? Well, you shit in my shoes! That's it, I'm gonna set my shit shoes on fire and throw them through your window!" Boiled down, this is pretty much the story of The Last of Us 2. Except instead of defecating in each other's shoes, Ellie and Abby commit atrocious acts of violence towards one another. Ellie, of course, is the widely loved second half of the acclaimed Part 1. Who is this buff chick that just killed my boy Joel, and why should I care about her?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to meet the Andersons. Meet Buff Chick, also known as Abby Anderson, and her dad, Jerry Anderson. Abby and Jerry are a part of the Salt Lake City Fireflies, and they've recently found a girl who's immune to the zombie infection. Being a proficient surgeon, Jerry thinks that he can operate on the girl, which would take her life, but ultimately provide a vaccine for the rest of humanity. Unfortunately, some meanie named Joel kills Jerry and all his friends and takes the girl away. Abby finds her dad and is very sad. Did I mention Jerry loves animals? After Abby and her boyfriend Owen move to Seattle and become soldiers of the WLF, Abby, Owen, and friends hunt down Joel and mercilessly beat him to death with a golf club. Did I mention Abby loves doggies?
Okay, cool. I get it. Joel killed her dad. So what? Why should I care about her? Joel was still my boy. Abby is obviously no Girl Scout, and she is shown to have little regard for most people's feelings aside from her own. By being so obsessed with revenge, she pushes Owen into the arms of Mel, and when Owen gets Mel pregnant, Abby just goes and bangs Owen behind Mel's back. Not cool, Abby. That's not to say there aren't some redeeming moments for her. Her life is saved by two Seraphites, which is the faction that her group, the WLF, is at war with, and she goes to great lengths to help and protect them, even to the point of causing herself to become exiled and hunted by the WLF. The question is there really any way to redeem and make the audience empathize with a character who you've watched do something so horrific to someone you care about in front of your eyes? Arguably, no. There isn't really a way to redeem someone who has personally done you so wrong. But, in my opinion, that's kind of the point here. For Ellie, and by extension us the player who have experienced her and Joel's journey together up until this point, witnessing this heinous act of violence incites us to want to enact revenge on the perpetrators, and makes the irrational decision to go on a revenge-fueled lone wolf mission across apocalyptic America seem much more understandable. Abby and her crew will suffer for what they've done. But wait, how is that any different from what Abby does to Joel? One of the most notable differences shown to us between Abby and Ellie that people like to throw around is that Ellie is visibly traumatized from the atrocious things she does to Abby's crew, whereas Abby seems to relish it.
She's pregnant. Good. Abby.
For this argument, however, I feel we need some context. Remember Abby's ex, Owen, and the girl he knocked up, Mel? Yeah. Well, Ellie kills them, and then when Abby comes for revenge, she does indeed seem to enjoy the prospect of killing Ellie's pregnant girlfriend before she ultimately gains composure of herself. But I mean, what do you expect? Ellie literally just killed her true love and the woman who is pregnant with his child. Do you expect that you would be singing Kumbaya, my lord, if you were in this situation and the other person was like, come on, bro, be humane, she's pregnant? Yes, Ellie does feel remorse for the terrible things she does. But why should that matter given the context of the story? It seems a little too easy of a cop-out to say someone can sit on a moral ivory tower because they feel bad for the atrocities they've committed. To use an extreme example, are you so charitable to say that we should have treated the Auschwitz SS troops differently based on whether or not they felt bad for committing genocide? Ellie and Abby both do horrendous things to one another in the groups they occupy. And going back to Joel and the Fireflies, we can examine the same thing. Joel wasn't given a choice about them operating on Ellie, and in the process of doing so, killing her, so he kills half of them. The Fireflies, on the other hand, believe that killing Ellie by operating on her would potentially give them a chance to rid humanity of its most destructive plague it's ever seen. To say that the point of the game is revenge equals bad seems reductionist to me. Yes, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind is very prevalent here, as Ellie and Abby slowly watch nearly everything they care about burn to a crisp in their quest for revenge. But for me personally, it's much more nuanced than this. Both Ellie and Abby have motivations and reasons as to why they devolve and act the way that they do. And I can't stand on the moral high ground and say that I wouldn't react the same way as either character does. If someone killed a person that I cared deeply for, well, I just don't know how I'd react. Planning to hunt them down or plotting their demise in some cruel, sadistic way isn't out of the question. I'm not trying to sound like some 4chan assassin here. I'm pretty certain I wouldn't be able to track someone hundreds of miles away to a town in the mountains like Abby, or fight my way through an entire militia Rambo style like Ellie does. I'm just trying to illustrate that although I certainly can't condone either of their actions from a moral standpoint, I also can't fully condemn them either. And in fact, I ultimately understand what would lead them to both make such rash and irrational decisions. In the real world, from whomever's perspective it is that you see things unfold, is typically who you are going to identify with, and who you are likely to emotionally rally behind.
What is wrong with you?
You should see your face right now.
What if I drown?
You're not gonna drown.
To Abby and her crew, Joel is a monster. To Ellie and her crew, Abby and friends are monsters. In an alternate timeline where smash hit The Last of Us was about Abby and her father, I would wager that people would have felt just as maddened at Joel as they do at Abby in this game. You would have found much more justification for the awful things Abby did, because you would have already had a connection with her and her dad, and it would have been much harder to justify the actions of the other, Joel and his crew. I'm not trying to pussyfoot around this and try to say that all the characters are equally likable or that Abby and Ellie should just hug it out and move on, but rather that it's easy for me to understand why both parties do the things that they do, whether they're right or wrong. Herein lies the major problem that The Last of Us 2 presents. When we live in a world where everyone has their own idea of what's right and wrong, we are subject to living with other people enacting their idea of justice upon one another. War, genocide, racism, terrorism, all are the results of someone believing their interpretation of the world is more important than others' lives. We so easily can reduce the beautiful complexities of a human being to nothing more than a cockroach to be stepped on our way to what we want. I don't have the solution on how to fix this, and neither does Naughty Dog. In the very end, after Ellie finally has Abby in her clutches, she lets go. To me, this isn't Ellie forgiving Abby. How could she? This is Ellie realizing that all this hatred, this unquenchable thirst for revenge, it's gotten her nowhere. Killing Abby won't bring back Joel. It won't change the pain she feels. It won't fix anything for her. She's thrown away everything that's important to her in the pursuit of getting Abby, and in that moment, she realizes it's pointless and that she's lost herself. So yeah, I like the story, but before you call me an Abby Tolicker, I do have some criticisms as well. First off, I wholeheartedly believe that The Last of Us 2 does humanize Abby, depending on how you categorize it. No one just enjoys being evil, so to see Abby experience such loss in the face of such hope of a vaccine, it at least makes it understandable why she acts the way that she does. That doesn't mean that I think she's some lovable teddy bear and I want her to hold me tight with her big strong arms, but I get it. She lost one of the most precious things to her, and in her eyes, in a completely non-human fashion. Ellie and Abby are two sides of the same coin. Their pain, motivations, and actions they take are quite similar in the grand scheme, and Naughty Dog really tries to beat this into your head. I generally like the way that this is portrayed through their stories, and even in some subtle ways, like how Ellie collects trading cards and Abby collects coins. It's a good way to show you, hey, all the repugnant shit aside, they're still two human beings with their own interests at the end of the day. On the other hand, some of the similarities are a little too on the nose for me. Oh, you like The Last of Us 1 where the bitter protagonist type gets more in touch with their human side thanks to their unsuspecting sidekick? Well, how about we do it again to show you Abby's not so bad? Oh, you like the whimsical museum flashback with Joel and Ellie? Well, how about we do a whimsical aquarium flashback with Abby and Owen to show you that Abby's not so bad? I just can't help but feel like there could have been some different ways to humanize Abby instead of recycling the old formula. That's all. Some scummy pre-release marketing and apparent abuse of staff during production definitely left a bitter taste in the mouths of many, and I can't blame them for it. I also wager that if I'd waited so long between part 1 and 2, the initial shock of Joel getting killed may have impacted the way I felt about the game. Ultimately, I'm not sure if this would have changed my opinion in the end, but it is worth mentioning. My remaining criticisms would be minor, so I'll skip over them. Thankfully, there wasn't anything too out of place that would have forced me to repress them from my memory. Wait a minute. I can understand the disappointment from half of the fanbase. Fundamentally, Last of Us Part 2 is the polar opposite of the first game and what made it so memorable. Part 1 is a tale of finding happiness in a miserable world. Part 2 is about being miserable in a miserable world where everything goes wrong for everyone you've ever cared about. Some of the decisions that Ellie makes in this game are so egregiously selfish, I'm sure to some it feels like a complete betrayal of the glimmer of hope that she was in Part 1. Even if you don't feel betrayed, it's hard to feel happy finishing the story. It's devoid of hope, and it's depressing to see a character that we've all spent so much time with go through such hardship. Part 2 is not a game to turn on if you want to feel comforted or to turn your brain off, which is what gaming is for many of us. That being said, I'm a big fan of this game. It presents interesting questions and perspectives to some of the most twisted aspects of human nature, and I'm here for it. It's bold, and I'm happy to see studios trying new formulas. Obviously, bold decisions don't always land, as is the case with The Last of Us 2 for many fans. Maybe you don't think it's bold, maybe you just think it's bad. And to that, I can only refute by saying, okay, fair enough. Listen, at the end of the day, art is subjective. Some people are willing to pay $1 million for whatever this is, and some might think that The Room is the best movie ever made. To that I say, you do you, boo. I'm not trying to straddle the fence. I'm sure there will be some people who wholeheartedly disagree with everything I've said about the game and why I enjoy it. Again, that's fine. What I will position to you is, why do we feel the need to fight online about such trivial things? This isn't just directed at people who didn't like the game. Some of the discourse I have seen on both sides has been outright ridiculous. Some of the people who didn't enjoy the game are for genuinely bigoted reasons, and then you have people who like the game broadly claiming that if you don't like it, it's because you're bigoted. There are genuinely good reasons to either like the game or not, and obviously, these two are absurd.
What you got there?
Bigot sandwiches.
Smells good.
On the extreme side of things, there have been people who have sent death threats both to voice actors and apparently themselves. I realize that this is the internet, where shit rises to the top, and the majority just moves on silently with their life. I also realize that what I'm about to say is the equivalent of screaming into the void, but come on, people. Discussing things like video games and why we liked them or didn't is a perfectly valid and healthy practice. We're not robots. Everyone has different interpretations of the same events, and we deserve to have an opinion and freely speak our minds. But when you get so infuriated that you call someone who doesn't like a video game that you do, a bigot, for no valid reason, or you're sending death threats to people because you didn't like, and I repeat, a fucking video game, I just have to ask, what benefit are you giving yourself? Never mind that there's a real person on the end of your outburst. Think about it. What benefit does it grant you? I'd wager that not only is there no benefit, but that you are actively detrimenting yourself by getting so worked up over something so inconsequential. There are plenty of things to get angry about. War, oppression, poverty, violence, cruelty, the list goes on. So why are you wasting your precious seconds in this life kicking and screaming over things like The Last of Us 2? I'm not trying to sit up on an ivory tower, but hopefully offer you something helpful. The way you choose to perceive my words is up to you. I just hope that we can move towards a more harmonious world, where we can work together to be better and channel our emotions into positive things. And that includes me. I'm not perfect either. Or, I suppose you could just call me a fucking retarded, idealistic piece of shit who should burn in hell. The choice is yours. Just remember, at the end of the day, it's just a game, bro.